Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're going to wait a bit just to make sure we get a few more people in the room till we get started, but we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning, and we're excited about the session. If you have any concerns from a technical standpoint, feel free to use the chat feature on the bottom of your screen. Looks like we've got about 15 or so people that are with us so far. So we'll give it a minute or two more before we jump in and get started. I wish we had some nice breakout session music to share with you, but at the moment we don't have that technical capability. So we're working on it for next year, but hopefully there won't be a next year for this. This will be the one and only virtual breakout session that we ever do. Let's hope so.
You can always
Mike,
sing,
we're getting music. We're getting music, Mike.
Really? Okay, well, let's see if we can get that technically taken care of here.
Well, the question is, are you taking requests or not?
Hey, and this is just a quick reminder to all of you. I'm Brad, kind of the technical guy in the background today. If you all are in the general session and you still have that tab open, make sure to turn that volume down in the video player, just so that sound isn't coming through.
Thank you, Brad.
You're welcome.
All right, got a few more people that are expected to come in, so let's give it maybe 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll get started right at 10 sharp, let's say. We're excited to have you with us this morning. Thank you for being here. For those of you who have been at prior presidential symposiums, this is a first and hopefully an only virtual session. We'll do our best. We're not technical experts, but we do have a technical expert in the room, so if you have any technical issues, please let us know, but hopefully everything will go smoothly from a technical standpoint. And give it another minute.
I don't see where to turn the volume down, just in the player for the conference.
You may have to get out of the other window completely and just stay in this one.
Doesn't that kind of kick us out of the conference?
No, you should stay in this breakout session.
Yeah, and Bob, if you hover on the bottom right of that video player, it's just a little drag bar. Or you can click pause. That's another way to make it stop. Just click pause. And when we get out of that breakout room, you can click play again and it will just catch up to where the stream actually is.
Pause worked really well.
Awesome. That works.
There's a lot of things in life I wish has pause buttons.
There you go. All right, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Michael Schnitzler, and I'll be serving as your moderator this morning. I am a business performance advisor at Insperity, have been a member of the TEI board since way back in 2007, and very excited to have you here. We're here this morning to talk about employee engagement in a midst of a current pandemic, as well as the post-COVID world that we're hopefully about to enter into soon, and specifically the challenge and the opportunities that come from a hybrid and work from home environment. A few housekeeping details before we get underway. I'm not going to tell you where the bathrooms are, though. That's your business to figure that out. But this session, in all seriousness, is meant to be interactive. We are here to share ideas and insights. Please, if you have a comment or a question, use the chat. Raise your hand if you want to. You can get to that through the participants key, and you'll see a raised hand. We'll do our best to make sure that everyone who has something to comment or question has the opportunity to do so. We have a co-moderator, Ross Van Beek, who's assisting with that too. So thank you, Ross, for your assistance. We have 5 terrific panelists with us this morning. I'm going to introduce them in a moment. We're going to cover as much ground as we can with their expertise and subject matter that they've prepared to discuss. Before we get started with that, though, and as everybody knows, we do have a hard stop at 11:05. So we have about an hour together. We are going to begin, however, with a poll. So we know who's in the room and what your most important issues are, and we're going to obviously do our best to rank them and cover them to the best of our ability. If we don't get to your question, however, please know that we can connect you to the panelists at the conclusion of the event for some post-discussion. So Brad, if you can drop the poll, and we'll start with that. Please answer the questions. We'll see if we can review them after everybody has a chance to respond.
Absolutely. And Michael, just a quick note, they are just put in as separate polls. So first one starting with size of workforce.
Great, thank you. Okay. So I'll comment. Looks like most of everybody in the room, it's an interesting split. A majority are between 20 and 50 employees. We've got a few that are under 20. We've got 3 that are between 50 and 100 and a couple that are more. So majority of our participants here are between 20 and 50 employee companies. So thank you for that. Next question. Okay. So significant majority of the employers in the room have given their employees the freedom to choose whether they'll work remotely or on the premises. We have a few that are required to work remotely. We have one that is required to go to work at the facilities, and some have other arrangements. So we've got a mixed bag here, but the majority in the room give their employees the freedom to proceed. Let's go with the last question. Okay, that one took a little longer, but it appears it's pretty even. We certainly employee productivity and performance got a response rate of 50%. How management needs to adapt has a response rate of about 33%. And long-term impact after the pandemic is over was also ranked pretty highly at around 42%. So we're going to do our best to focus on these particular areas during our session today, and I'm sure we'll be talking about most of these during our Q&A. Great, thank you for that. I'm going to introduce our panelists now, and as I do, if you could, each panelist could just go off mute and say a quick hello, we'd appreciate it in no particular order. So the first panelist we have is Shazia Sultan. Shazia, where are you? There you are.
I'm right here. Good morning, everyone.
Right. Thank you, Shazia. Shazia is the principal consultant of Employee Zen Consulting Limited. She has over 2 decades of diverse experience, and she delivers in-depth knowledge in employee relations, recruitment, compliance, benefits administration, policies and procedures management, working independently with senior leadership to develop and implement strategies, making her clients more effective, transparent, and profitable. So Shazia, thank you for being here. Next, we have Mark Harris. Mark, where are you?
Hello.
There he is. Hi, Mark. Mark is the owner of the Harris Development Group, and he's a consultant focused on relationship building, employee and leadership development, managing diversity and organizational change. He is committed to providing individuals, teams, and organizations with the people skills required to ensure success and growth. Thank you, Mark.
Welcome.
Kelly Huber.
Good morning, everyone.
Kelly is visiting us from the great state of Missouri this morning, so welcome, Kelly. She is an organizational psychologist and a consultant with CMA Global, which is a firm of business psychologists believing that people and culture make or break an organization. Kelly's work at CMA focuses on psychological assessment, organizational functioning, employee engagement, and leadership development. Thank you, Kelly. Kathy Dunn.
I'm right here. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Kathy's got an interesting background there. I'm not quite sure what that is, but you'll tell us later.
That's our super rooster.
That's right. Okay, I should have known. Kathy is Senior Vice President of Internal Operations at Big Red Rooster Flow, and she is responsible for creating a corporate culture that promotes team building, a high-level engagement, and company loyalty. Big Red Rooster is a 12-year-old project management company based in suburban Chicago with over 100 employees with major corporate clients. Kathy was brought onto the team as the second employee in the organization, has participated in all functions within the company, and under her leadership, Big Red Rooster was recognized as a Best Places to Work recipient by the Chicago Tribune. So welcome, Kathy.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least is my colleague, Jennifer Morris-Boyd.
Good morning.
Jennifer,
Good morning, Mike.
Jennifer is management of HR services at Insperity. She has a wealth of experience, including leadership and management in HR, business development, employee development, and team building. She's been with Insperity for 13 years, has more than 20 years of leadership experience in numerous industries. And in her current role, Jennifer and her team work with their clients in the Chicago area to build and enhance their human capital management strategy and meet their or exceed their business goals. So quite a panel we've got here. And I am going to take a moment now and share my screen and just put up on my screen the questions that we're going to start with here. Can everyone see my screen, hopefully? Yes. And since certainly employee engagement is a key topic in this discussion, I'm going to kick this off by asking Shazia, if you would be kind enough to start with our first question. How can organizations keep up with employee engagement using remote or hybrid work schedules that we're all dealing with today?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael. And, you know, this has been a topic over the last decade, right, as organizations have switched, but never more so than in the last few months. First and foremost, I think people should not step away from that employee engagement survey. I think it is the simplest form of engaging with your employees and just getting a pulse of what they're thinking. They do not need to be in-depth surveys. You can do it through SurveyMonkey, which is a free platform, and just quick 10 questions. How are you feeling? Do you feel isolated right now from your colleagues? Questions around, do you feel comfortable coming into the workplace? I see that some of you definitely let people decide whether they want to come in or not. But there is sometimes a little bit of pressure that employees put on themselves. And so just getting an idea what would make them feel more comfortable coming in to collaborate with their team members. So I think employee surveys, very simple. It's a great way of just collecting some data and then deciding what should be your action items based on that. My other favorite tool right now for engaging with your employees is doing virtual coffee breaks. You can partner people together, teams can pick one another, do it a couple times a week, and it's really just 15 minutes that are scheduled over Zoom, and you have a cup of coffee and you just talk about the day, talk about things that are happening, talk about your children, your dog, anything that you want to kind of touch base on. It's kind of the akin to your water cooler break that we used to have in the office. Another thing that would be fun with more groups of people is to have themed monthly employee Zoom meetings. I have a client right now that does a recipe exchange, or there is a book club that meets every 4 weeks. They select a book, it's open to all employees, whoever wants to pop in or pop out. They also have done, themes like, what is your favorite iPhone app that you cannot live without. And that way it's engaging and people can walk away with some information. You can also lastly do a company-wide virtual meeting. I have a client that just recently they have 400 employees, all 400 got onto Zoom, and they did, it was really cool. They got a motivational speaker. They had an address from the CEO of the company. They did an update about the different business lines, right? Marketing gave an update, finance gave a company update. Lasted about 45 minutes to an hour. It was very quick, but it made everybody feel reconnected with the organization.
Thank you, Shazia. And let me just mention, if you have questions, comments, we want this to be interactive. We find that the majority of the value from these sessions is from interactions from our participants. So don't hesitate. We'll try to keep this managed properly to the best of our ability, but if you'd like to ask any questions or make any comments, let us know. Go into the chat or raise your hand. And if it's really burning, just jump in and we'll do our best to make sure we can manage it. Let me turn to Kelly. Kelly, as this crisis continues to wear on, what advice would you give leaders as they are dealing with continuing the struggle to foster morale and employee well-being while primarily managing a remote workforce, especially from an emotional intelligence perspective?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, so thanks everyone for having me. Good morning. We're in this really interesting time where we have shifted a bit out of crisis mode and into this more continued chronic phase where, things are a bit less intense than they were back in March, but where we're still having kind of no end in sight. And so what we're finding at our organization is with folks we're coaching is that they've been running this pretty adrenaline-fueled pace, and many are feeling pretty emotionally and physically exhausted right now. And so if you were there, know you're not alone. And I would just encourage, as you're thinking about planning for the logistics of returning to work and thinking about how to keep your employees safe, hopefully you're emphasizing just as much psychological health as well. And that really starts with you as a leader, making sure you're prioritizing your own self-care, the basics about getting enough sleep and exercise, and making sure you're prioritizing relationships. And remembering, there's a common notion that that can be a bit self-indulgent, but it really is predictive of important team outcomes. It also helps you be a good leader and a role model for your team to make it safe for them to prioritize those types of behaviors as well. And, then as you're thinking about your team, just remember often that many are still in a heightened state of stress and anxiety right now. And we know from an abundance of research that that makes it pretty hard to concentrate and pretty hard to do one's job. So, operating from a high level of empathy right now as a manager, slowing down to meet people where they are, to ask the important question about how can I help you? That's a pretty powerful yet often unasked question. Really emphasizes that you are, caring about your employee and that you're going to help facilitate the conditions, by which they can be successful. And then, just helping your employees build their buffers against stress. In the research, there are a few ways we can do this, and a lot of them center around building a sense of social connection, control, and autonomy. So the first one there, we metabolize stress through relationships. So making sure that we're prioritizing, facilitating those social connections, whether that's padding in more time at the beginning of Zoom meetings to check in with one another on a more informal level, virtual happy hours. I love, Shazia, your idea about the coffee meetings. Those are all great ways to be more intentional about connecting when we can't do that more organically right now. And then, thinking about control, that is a big predictor of stress. So the more you can, as a leader, help employees gain a sense of control and autonomy, it's really powerful. The first way is making sure you're offering open communication. Keeping employees up to date about the state of the business helps reduce a sense of uncertainty. Keeping them in the know about the mission and the goals, helping them, have good structure to achieve their goals, all helps with that sense of control. And then, we're also in this phase where the boundaries between home and work are really blurry right now, where there's not natural start and break and end time. So making sure you're checking in with your employees on that. Are they taking enough breaks? Are they putting away their work both physically and mentally at night so that they aren't burning out? And then lastly, just giving them a good amount of flexibility. Everyone is in a different place right now. Many are at home, troubleshooting kids' Zoom meetings, right? So the more you can meet folks where they are and offer that flexibility so that they can bring their best to work is really helpful. So those are just a few tips for navigating the psychological side of COVID as a leader.
Great, Kelly. Thank you. That's great insight.
Thank you.
Mark, I know you spend a lot of time dealing with leadership and coaching. Can you share with us some information about how coaching might have been affected and changed during the COVID crisis and what's happening now in a hybrid world in terms of how to best take advantage of coaching leaders in your particular field?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. I'm glad that Kelly and Shazia mentioned some of the points because it ties directly into coaching. Most managers, most leaders don't coach enough, even in good times. And now with this crisis, people are feeling more isolated, stressed. It was mentioned, anxiety and exhausted. They're worried about job security. Even though we say, hey, your job's safe, it may not be. So they're just really, really worried. In addition, there's less what I call work-life harmony. I've stopped using the word balance because I think for all of us on this call today, there is no balance. We work more than we have any personal life. So the work-life harmony, based on the fact that they're at home, is at askew. What we as leaders need to do through coaching is to demonstrate our higher EQ, our higher emotional intelligence, through an empathetic fashion by asking them questions about how they're doing. By doing this, we're going to show a higher level of commitment to them that they really do value within our organization. So many people mistake coaching as being a tactical or a status update. What's going on with your projects? How are the projects going? That's not coaching. That is really what I mentioned. It's just a tactical status update. We need to have discussions with these individuals in terms of what they're doing well, give them some feedback, help them maintain what they're doing well, help enhance their skills to the next level through skill development. We need to do some of these general check-ins. And I love Shazia's idea about these coffee breaks. I don't drink coffee, but you can still have your coffee break. I think what's important is to have regular meetings with them where we let the employees take a little bit more control of the discussion. Let them tell us how things are going, what they're struggling on, what type of guidance they need from us. In addition, I think we need to spend more time just following up with what's going on in their lives. Now, that gets very difficult from an HR perspective because some employees are more closed, if you will, don't want to share a lot about their personal life. Others are more open. So I think you have to have them help you identify where the balance is. If we do a better job of coaching on a regular basis, and regular is determined, between you and the employee. Is it once a week? Is it once every 2 weeks? But it has to be frequently enough, whereas they're feeling that you are committed to them, that you are interested in helping them through this pandemic, because everything is up for grabs at this point. So we need to increase our coaching. The last thing I'd like to share with you is there was a survey done before the pandemic, and it talked about what is most important to employees. And many of the managers say things like good wages, job security, promotion. Employees are at the opposite end. They want to feel appreciated for the work they're doing, a simple thank you. They want to feel in on things. They want to know what's going on with the company. And they want empathetic help on these problems. And that ties back to the EQ. So, thank you.
Great stuff, Mark. Thank you. And before we go to our next panelist, interesting question that Jan, one of our leaders of TEI, so thanks for being here, Jan, posed in the chat. We'd be interested perhaps in hearing from any of our business owners or leaders out there in the room. Was there any pushback from employees that selected virtual, meaning they chose to work from home, if you gave them the freedom to make that decision versus reporting, if you will, to your offices? Does anyone have any comments or would like to share any of their insights on that? If now would be a good time, if you'd like to share with us, I'm sure we'd appreciate it.
Well, we had Bob Dianetti here. We had kind of a little bit of a pushback in that people wanted us to buy them printers, set up their home office space ergonomically, pay them for their electric bills, their cable bills, and so on. And it's something we had to shut down pretty quickly because we said, you're saving all this time by not commuting, not driving, not putting wear and tear on your car. And if everybody wants this, we're just going to make everybody come into the office. And it quieted down pretty quickly, but it was interesting that was I'm not saying it was brought up by everybody in the company, but it was brought up by probably about a third of the consultants that work for us, is they wanted some kind of remuneration for working at home. Don't know if that's something that other people are seeing as well.
Bob, what is the nature of your business, Bob?
We do instructional design work. We develop technical training programs, e-learning, webinars, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else would like to piggyback on Bob's comment? Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, this is Les. Hi. Yeah, we didn't experience that particular issue. What we really went through was having a team of administrators that really had no experience working from home. So them having to coach them through how to manage their time effectively, how to utilize their tools effectively, how to use their printer as a scanner, how to upload a document as a PDF, how to operate in a virtual world was really a challenge for a lot of our people. We provided some of them with work environment tools. We're in a business where electronics is really easy for us to come by. We're an electronics recycler, so we've got a lot of that stuff around pretty much at hand. But that was our real challenge, was helping our team manage their time, really getting a routine to their day that included, showing up to your office, which happened to be your kitchen table or wherever, like you were going to work, like prepared, dressed, having had your coffee. Your routine should be no different really at home than it is at work. And even then it took quite a bit of coaching and guidance to get them to actually manage their time without the distractions, the kids at home, the dogs, and everything else that kind of are the home work environment. So that was really our challenge.
Very interesting. Thank you.
Michael, I'd like to just quickly add, Jan, one of the things, and I messaged you, it's really hard sometimes for managers to push their biases aside and say, okay, I'm going to be able to trust this person, they'll get their work done. I would give it a little time, really measure output, work output. So if there's deadlines, if there's tasks that need to be done and you feel like they aren't getting done, talk to that point versus saying, I think you need to get into the office because I'm not seeing work being completed. So really measure the output that's happening.
Thank you, Shazia. Mark made an interesting point about employee engagement versus perhaps employee satisfaction, if that's the right way to express it. I'm going to ask Jennifer Morris Boyd, Ms. Verity, perhaps to give her perspective on that, especially from an outsourced HR perspective. So, Jennifer?
Sure. So, it's interesting because a lot of what falls into employee satisfaction, employee engagement, they overlap each other. But there are some definite things that can be dissatisfiers to employees that can really affect employee engagement. I mean, employee engagement is the holy grail. That's where you get the maximum effort from your folks. That's where you're getting the most productivity, the most innovation. And when we're in this time where they are, there's the are my kids going to school? Or are my kids not going to school? Am I going to have a job? Am I not going to have a job? Is it safe for me to go into the office? Is it not safe for me to go into the office? One of the things you really want to look at are the dissatisfiers. So I love what Shazia said earlier about a survey, because there are some of our clients who are like, no, let's just hold off on doing a survey. And I'm like, you know what? No, now is a really great time to do it, because you can see what is sitting on the minds of your folks. And it gives you an opportunity to address those things. So, if it is I don't have a relationship with my manager hasn't been checking in on me, I don't feel like they care about what's going on, you're going to be able to address that and fix it. Because sometimes, especially in the companies that we're talking about here on this call, somewhere between 20 and 100 employees, your managers may also be players. They're player coaches. And so they just may be focused on, I'm just doing my job, I'm not thinking about my people. And so getting that survey information will find out if that is a dissatisfier to your folks. For those companies that have gone completely remote and they don't have the hybrid option, going back to what Bob said, your folks have an option, but if your folks don't have an option because you live in an area where you've had to shut it down and you're not going back till spring, because we have clients that are in that boat, make sure they have the tools and resources available to them to do the job. We've sent care packages home to our folks, paper, pen, if they need ink cartridges, whatever it may be, you'd be supplying that in the office if we were there, but if they're fully remote, they're going to need that at home too. And again, do they have the connection with their coworkers? One of the things on a lot of surveys that you'll see is, do I have a friend at work? That matters to people. And when you're not in the work environment, how are do you know that that's an issue, so that you can build in these coffee breaks, happy hours, make a meal together, and some of the things we've talked about. So, so make sure you understand what the dissatisfiers are to your folks. Those things are really going to have an impact on the satisfaction of their job, and then ultimately the engagement and whether you're going to get the productivity, innovation, and retention that you need for your organization.
Great. Thank you.
Michael?
Kathy, you run Mark, you have something. Go ahead.
Yeah, something that Jennifer said really piqued my attention. Oftentimes we assume what their dissatisfiers are without actually asking them. And that lends itself toward our own personal biases. So I think asking more questions of our staff during this time is going to be a lot more productive and successful than simply telling them what we think is going on.
Can I just piggyback on, oh,
go ahead, Kelly.
I was going to piggyback quickly. As you think about asking for dissatisfiers, it's so important to be creating that environment of psychological safety that Mark spoke to earlier. And, there are many ways to do that, but a lot of that comes from the leader, him or herself, being vulnerable, right? To not be afraid to let folks know that, hey, here are the things that I'm struggling with at home, and here are some of my dissatisfiers right now, and here's how I'm dealing. It makes it safer for the employee to feel like they can also share.
It's a great segue to our next question. I want to ask Kathy, since she's overseeing a group of 100 employees and obviously has been quite successful in achieving great success from a cultural standpoint. Now that the whole landscape, employer landscape has changed, due to COVID, how would you comment relative to culture and employee engagement? Are they still critical to the overall success of Big Red Rooster? And if so, how are you reconciling that with the new normal, so to speak?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is absolutely. It's just as critical. Culture and engagement go together. I always try to think of culture as, just kind of identifying who you are, who your company is. And I always say that culture is, it exists whether you hone it or not. So if you want to let it run rampant and let your employees determine what that culture is based on how they're feeling and what they're going through, that's one way to go. But we try to really zone in on it. And, you know, it basically is who you are, how you communicate with your employees, how you celebrate them. Are you paying attention to, you know, some of the hot topics that are going on today? Hot in some people's worlds. For us, none of this is trendy. I think of a trend as nearly a year, and we've been doing this for over 10 years, living this culture engagement life, and it's worked well for us, so we continue. But when we think about our culture and who we are and what we stand for, when we bring people on and we talk about our core values and what we are about and what our culture is, we try to stay true to that. So we're bringing people on that also buy into that and want to get to that level. So for me, culture drives engagement. And the way I think of engagement is kind of what everyone has talked about today, and that is motivating employees to perform at a high level based on whatever the reasons and whatever the conditions are. So my team and I work hard to, back to Shazia on the survey, we use Tiny Pulse, which is our platform for surveying. We send out a question every 2 weeks asking them things that we want to try to create action plans on and better. Some of them, some of the other surveys we send out are more lengthy surveys. So we've done diversity and inclusion surveys. We did a COVID survey. It was probably about 12 questions long, so we got some good feedback on that. Was it Mark that talked about employees wanting, no, maybe it was Mark. Someone talked about employees wanting certain things in their house. We tried to address that before we made the decision to go home. So it was kind of like, this is what work looks like at home. This is what we offer. And this is what it's going to look like in the office. So when we made that choice, we didn't have to go backwards on that. But for the engagement part of it, again, motivating people, especially at this time, you know, different things may motivate them. So the psychological fear, you know, or safety, trying to create, you know, fear paralyzes. So trying to create the opportunity for employees to feel like they can share what's going on in their life and they feel safe to do that. Building resilience, all the things like talking about the coffee breaks. We do, one of our events is a Spill the Beans, where they have coffee with the partners of the company. So you can, you know, they can ask whatever questions they want and get a sense of control there. So that's how we kind of try to engage them on that. Making sure that we're looking to help them with their personal growth and their purpose and their passion. And really what's number one on my list right now is just what behaviors are we normalizing? And that would be trust for me, just trying to build that trust. We had it when we were in-house. Now it's a little bit different. We're a hybrid company. And so it's clear to them that, hey, we might be changing some things up, but at the end of the day, you can trust us that we're going to be doing what's best for everyone involved. So we work hard on increasing that engagement. So if you think about it and you have this culture that you've decided fits for you, and obviously that's always evolving, but then you hire people that believe in that culture, and then you lift them up and they trust you. And so that drives, I mean, obviously, you know, the research out there shows that, well, there are probably about 50% of your employees that aren't engaged, and there's a cost to that. So it can't possibly be a thing of the past, because if productivity is down, it impacts, obviously, you know, your cost. They say that, I think it was a Gallup poll that said that a disengaged employee costs about 34% of the salary. So if you have a $100,000 a year employee, the cost of them being disengaged is that 34%. You have, you know, headhunters who are taking advantage of people getting in and, you know, higher salaries. And obviously the cost and the time involved with someone being disengaged or leaving the company for someone else. So, you know, back to the initial question of, is it still, is culture and engagement still an important part of the success today? Again, absolutely yes. It's something that you have to just keep attacking, not any more so than in the past, in my opinion, just differently, the types of things that you're looking for to engage them.
Yeah, and so I'll piggyback off of that because you talked about a disengaged employee leaving. It's even worse if the disengaged employee stays.
Right.
So, so going back to Mark's, what Mark was talking about earlier with the coaching and, knowing what's going on, to Shazia's point about making sure you're managing to the outputs and that you're getting what you need from those folks. It doesn't change whether you're remote or you're in the office or some hybrid of the two. You've somehow got to figure out how to get those people out of your organization, or they're going to do a lot more damage, not only what they can do, but what they can do to the people around them when it comes to engagement as well.
Okay. When we did our initial poll at the beginning of the session, many of you said that you gave your employees the freedom to choose whether, at this moment, whether they could be working in the office or working from home. So I'd like to pose a question to our attendees. If you'd like to jump in, please do. And my question would be, if you're not back in the office 100% yet, which apparently most of us are not, what would be the deciding factor in terms of when you would return? And is it possible that some of your employees will never want to return to what it was like in the pre-COVID world, if you will? And if the answer to that question is yes, does that work for you as a business owner or manager, or does that not work for you? So anyone want to jump in on that one? And if I get stunned silence, we'll just go to another topic.
We were lucky enough at Big Red Rooster Flow to, a year before COVID, we were testing out the idea of working from home because we at that time saw it as a perk. We were getting a different group of people and obviously a different talent level when we weren't confining ourselves. So we were testing the waters a year prior to COVID. And, talking about having, someone had talked about, having to teach them how to work from home. Luckily for us, I kept talking to a lot of employees just about, we're very transparent here, and there's a lot of casual conversation with me and each of the employees regularly. And I kept hearing about Sunday scaries, and people, I'd ask them, oh, how was your weekend? And they would say, well, Saturday was great, but then Sunday I had to do my laundry and get ready for Sunday, and I kind of missed the day. So we had implemented a Monday work from home a year ago. So we already had that opportunity to get everybody set at home and feel comfortable. Lucky for us. And then we also put soft phones on our computers. So we didn't have to worry about the phones, and you can make a call from anywhere. But I don't know, I guess I'm just sharing our experience. We've been 1 day work from home, 4 days in the office, to now most of them are working from home, but not much has changed because we had that. So, yeah.
What, any of our attendees want to jump in?
Hey, Michael, I'll jump in real quick. So one of the things that's limiting our business is interstate travel and access to airports and airplanes. Some states actually have quarantines on what are considered high-risk states coming from people coming in from those high-risk states. Illinois is one of them. As you know, our corporate offices are in Illinois, and I work remotely from California, so I can't actually go to the office because of the restriction by the state for a mandatory 14-day quarantine, anybody coming out of a high-risk state. Our CEO has the same issue. He's in Texas. So that's creating some difficulties and challenges for us, for sure. In terms of the admin and the people that we had working from home, I think what everybody, pretty much everybody who is in state and can return to work has. Obviously the social distancing, the personal protective equipment and everything else is employed at our facilities to make sure that it is safe. But the real convenience is now if somebody needs to stay home for their kids, for a spouse, for a fear that possibly they've been exposed, for any other reason, they now have a work environment at home. So that is actually providing the tools for us and them specifically to stay productive in the face of the challenges that everybody is feeling right now.
Thank you, Les. Kelly, let me turn back to you for a minute. There's a prevalent notion, I think, among many managers that employees are likely, somehow you mentioned it earlier, perhaps, or somebody did, to slack off or possibly be less productive when they're working remotely. And I know your organization, from a psychological perspective, if you will, has done some research in this area, in this field. Can you share with us some of the things you've learned in that particular topic?
Yes. So there has been a lot of research actually that we've done in our field on telecommuting for years prior to COVID. And really the punchline of it is that there are lots of positive outcomes of flexible work arrangements, where there is this notion that perhaps performance or productivity might decline. That has not been found in the research. Actually, what we find is that performance tends to increase and minimally is maintained. And other, positive outcomes include there's more flexibility. We're going to get employees who feel like they're able to Kathy's point, just have more flexibility over their calendar. And then just more organizational commitment, less turnover. Right now we're hearing, now that so many employees have gotten a taste of work from home, that this is going to become something that they might be seeking in future employers. So I think it's worth considering as a potential competitive advantage as we've experimented with work from home on this mass scale and have found that indeed in many ways it is effective. There's a caveat in the research that, in general, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. The best outcomes tend to be a more moderate level of work from home where, maybe it's Kathy's approach where folks work from home one day. So it's usually 2 to 3 days you get the best outcomes. And it's the idea that performance can go up. There's that increased level of focus at home, flexibility, as well as when folks are in the office, you have that opportunity for that organic collaboration that happens at the water cooler. You're able to, again, nourish that culture that's so important. So considering kind of the both and strategy is something I think that is really worthwhile, but it's really important. There are some important boundary conditions to remember that, to Shazia's point, it really becomes about managing the work and not the worker, and not controlling too tightly in a way that feels disempowering and where we don't get the benefits of flexibility. Shifting organizational norms so that it doesn't become that employees who work from home are biased in the form of fewer raises and promotions and developmental opportunities. That's a commonly cited reason why folks, even when they're offered the flexible work arrangement, do not actually take advantage of it. And then lastly, just making sure that top management is really bought into it and that they're seeing that they are accepting of this type of arrangement. And part of that is, do I see my manager engaging in the work from home situation? If I see them at the office 5 days a week, I'm going to feel a little bit less safe to feel like I can take advantage of that benefit myself.
Michael?
Yes, please.
Yeah. One thing that we haven't mentioned yet is some of the generational differences. And if I had a crystal ball, I would dare to venture that the younger generations, the millennials, the Generation Z, are going to be more attuned to wanting to work more frequently from home. Whereas some of the older generations, the baby boomers, and the other generations, may be struggling a little bit more with this because of the technological issues. So I think that as we coach, as we look at employee engagement, we also have to keep in mind what's the generation that we're addressing. And I think that's something that oftentimes we as leaders neglect to think about. We look at what's most important for us and how we would handle it as opposed to the younger generations.
Michael, can I add to that as well?
Please do.
I agree. And my fear, I think, eventually those that need to come in or feel the need to come in for one reason or another, we allow them to do that. The tricky part for me right now, because we've been hiring, is figuring out the onboarding and training piece of it. But to the generational point, my concern, and probably the reason that we will be back in the office probably 2 or 3 days, it will be our new norm, is so that the generations that are new to the work world, so we can continue to grow them. Talking about engagement earlier, those are the things that need to be kind of honed, is their communication skills, how they are connecting with team members and building that psychological safety, and not just having them sitting in their basement doing their job all day. I think it's really important in my head to make sure that we do get them in, that generation or those two that are newer to the workforce, and really build that side of their business acumen.
Yep. Excellent point. Thank you. Shazia, you made an interesting comment in the chat. Just maybe have you speak to the maintenance, if you will, of open lines of communication between managers and direct reports, and the phenomenon of Zoom fatigue and video calls versus traditional calls, and texting versus calls and so forth, with a generational perspective that Mark was talking about. So maybe you can pick up and speak to that point.
Sure, absolutely. So I think at this point, all modes of communication are fair game. I think if you're going to text your employees and have conversations via text, make sure that it doesn't start at 6 or 7 in the morning, but more, normal business hours. And I would wrap up texting by 5 or 6 p.m. the latest, unless there's some sort of critical emergency that needs some discussion. There are still times where phone calls are just absolutely perfect. I think that employees, especially those that have dependents at home, whether it's elderly or children, they're overcompensating for not being in the office by just constant Zoom invitations, constantly wanting to video conference. If it's a 20-minute conversation or just a quick check-in, a phone call is absolutely fine. Conference calls can definitely get a little bit more, difficult to hear people if there's more than 3 people on them, and if they're all on their cell phones. At that time, definitely a video conference call is great. Talking about keeping open lines of communication between your employee, I think someone mentioned this earlier, continue on with the structured one-on-one meetings. If you met with your employee every Monday from 9 to 9:30 to talk about just projects, statuses, training, professional development, whatever those conversations were, have those still. I know that we are checking in with each other a lot more and having more conversations, but those are more ad hoc, one-off type things, but that structured one-on-one is important. So keep that going. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to come back to Mark for a minute. Mark spoke earlier about the importance of leadership and the differences in terms of how we define coaching in today's world, so to speak. Mark, can you talk about the ramifications perhaps of not coaching, and what are the implications perhaps of business as usual versus taking advantage of this unique time we're in to coach leadership and employees?
Certainly. I think there's a lot of ramifications. Number one is, as somebody mentioned earlier, lower performance. If we're not coaching people in the job that they're in, their performance may suffer, which is going to have a direct impact on the bottom line of organizations. The other one is more subtle. We're sending an unconscious message to these employees that we're not as committed to them as they might like us to be. And therefore, they're going to make up their own story. And the story could be anywhere from my boss is too busy, to my boss doesn't care, to I'm going to get fired. And those are all very dangerous. So I think this is a golden opportunity, as somebody mentioned again earlier, to talk about developing the relationship, and the relationship beyond just, the job, them as a person, a more holistic approach. So this is a golden opportunity for every leader to really step up his or her game in terms of developing these relationships, and hopefully heading off them starting to look for another job when the economy turns around. So I think it's imperative that we spend more time with each of our employees. Now, the problem that therefore becomes, where do we find this time? And we have to have it scheduled in our Outlook. We have to have it written down that this is my time to reach out to these employees, to have these conversations, be they the 15-minute, as Shazia said earlier, be it a half an hour, whatever it may be, but it has to be scheduled time. And that's critical. And there's no substitute for this at this point, because there will be significant departures from organizations when the economy turns around, which it will at some point. I just don't know when. And I think that through coaching and through engagement and through these surveys, it's an ideal time for us. And that may mean we have to stretch our comfort level quite a bit.
And can I just piggyback on that for just a moment, and thinking about the size of the organizations on here, you really have to focus on, do your frontline mid-level managers know how to have those conversations? And if they don't, you may need to give them some mentoring and some coaching, because left to their own fruition, there's no telling what those conversations might look like. So that would be the one thing. If you've never put some time into that development of those front and mid-level managers, if they've never had those conversations, if they were just your really good employees that were promoted up, make sure you spend some time with them so that they know how to have those conversations, what to do with the information if things come back. Because the worst thing that can happen is they do have those conversations and then they just sit on the information and don't bring it back to you as the senior leadership team, because you could have blind spots in the organization that could, again, to Mark's point, they're going to fill in the blank that there's a lack of care or a lack of concern.
And I would add to that I think this is the perfect opportunity in this scenario to not just have the employee engagement, but the leadership team engaged. I know we've invested recently in some leadership training, and it's a little bit easier to actually schedule in with our leaders while they're working from home. But that one-on-one time, Mark, that you talked about, really, because in a lot of situations that we've had here, supervisors are multitasking or they're skipping meetings because they get caught up in some things that are going on here. But it's nice because it's a real period of one-on-one engagement where you're totally engaged with the employee and, the direct report and the supervisor. So I couldn't agree more with both of those, just to better everything. Our work is different. Where we're working from is different, but the mission is still the same in what we're trying to accomplish.
We've only got about 10 minutes to go. It's hard to believe we've covered a lot in a short amount of time. One of the titles of the topics of this session was not just about the challenges we're dealing with, but also about the opportunities dealing with in a work from home and hybrid world. So I'm going to ask our panelists to take a moment, or just maybe a minute or two each, and if they'd like, if they don't want to, that's fine, but comment on where perhaps they see the opportunities that may emerge from this crisis in terms of how companies can position themselves for, future growth over the next 5 to 10 years relative to the lessons that they've learned from this experience. So in no particular order, why don't we start with, I don't know, Shazia, you want to take that one? And then we'll move over to Kelly.
Sure. One of the things that honestly worries me about just the state that we're in right now is companies have spent over a decade trying to re-engage women in the workforce and promoting that diversity and inclusion. And they have, worked and risen through the ranks, but having, so many issues around school and children going back to school, there are a lot of women that are pulling out of the workforce, whether they're C-levels or, just having graduated college and getting back in, and maybe they need to be home to help siblings. I mean, there are women that are pulling out, and I think it's going to take us backwards. So I think it's important for companies to really figure out ways to help some of their employees. And this could be also fathers, right? But how to keep them engaged, how to provide them balance without being discriminatory, right? We still want to provide opportunities for everybody, but really focus on your workforce that needs a little bit more empathy and grace. And how do you do that? So I think those organizations that can come out of this and build, again, that strong culture for employees that have a lot going on in their personal lives, they are going to be shining stars once this is over. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shazia. Very good. Kelly, you want to just take a moment or two
Sure.
on the
Yeah.
from this going forward?
Yeah, there's an interesting concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. I think a lot of us have heard of post-traumatic stress after a crisis, but a lot of people find this concept of post-traumatic growth where it's, I wish this hadn't have occurred, but given that it did, and given that I've gone through this challenge, I've built a sense of resiliency, maybe a deeper sense of connection with others. And so I think a lot of folks on the other side of this are going to see that. But on a broader level, I hope one of the outcomes of this is that it humanizes the workplace a little bit, where we've now gotten to peek behind the curtains to see about our employees' lives, right? Where we're seeing kids and dogs run behind our Zoom meetings, right, in a way that we hadn't seen them before. Especially for leaders, I think that is a level of vulnerability that I think will contribute to psychological safety when folks come back into the office. And then I shared all those benefits about flexible work arrangements. I think, again, this has been a mass experiment. We've polled all of our 400 clients, and we found the majority of them are considering some version of a flexible work environment going forward. It might not be full-time, but on a part-time basis. And so I'm excited to see that's a level of flexibility that might be afforded in the future for folks.
Great stuff. Thank you, Kelly. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, dovetailing a lot of what you said before, my concern is that the team culture is diminishing, and there's more of an individual approach. People have less feelings of inclusivity because they're working in isolation, and individuals are feeling less appreciated for their contributions. So to turn that around, again, it's a golden opportunity for us to show our commitment to our teams by having a variety of team activities. Remote team bingo, where they all submit a baby picture or a high school picture. So they get to find out more about each other. They get to find out what every employee's on that team's life is about, what pets they have, what their values are, what their interests are, what are they doing outside of work. And therefore, by doing some of these activities as a team, they feel more appreciated and they feel more connected. And that goes hand in hand with engagement. So I think we have to be creative about how we create some of these opportunities for the team to function as a team.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, take a minute or two, please, with your final thoughts on the opportunities going forward.
When I hire people, I always talk about how important it is to our culture that we consider everyone a whole person. They're not just an employee, they're a son, a mother, you know, all the things that make up their life. And I always think, you know, you can hear what people say, but watch their feet. And what I've expressed to the executive team here is now is an opportunity for us to walk the walk and soften ourselves and be compassionate, to Kelly's point, and really try to build them. I've asked all of them to write letters, handwritten letters to their employees. We have a culture committee here, so we took a day. We all get a 1 day paid time off to do something charitable. And so we built, you know, a little bag for them and included this letter and then hand delivered it to those that were comfortable with that. But really to just keep working on engagement. There are fun ways to do it, a million fun ways to do it. We're always looking for more, but then also back to my original point, building the employee themselves, giving them purpose, passion, feeling safe, all of those things beyond the fun.
Thank you, Kathy. We appreciate it. And before I'm going to ask Jennifer to comment too. Before I do, in case we get cut off here, I don't know if we're going to get cut off somehow at 11:05 sharp. I think we'll have the room a little longer, actually. But just in case you're not aware, after this session is over, please make sure you head back into the main room. I think Ross put the link in the chat in case you need it. You can jump right there at the end and go back into the main room. There will be another breakout session that will be starting after a brief break. So wanted to make sure we got that clearly across. Jennifer, you have any final comments from your perspective, and then we'll kind of wind things up.
Yeah, I think there are two things that really kind of excite me about what is next. And one is we do see an uptick in the amount of development that is taking place of the leaders and employees, and they're taking that time and they're developing their people. And I think that's going to speak volumes to the organization. It's going to speak volumes to the productivity, the profitability, and how this, and how the economy continues to move as we do that for our folks here. The other thing that excites me, and it's a little different topic, is that now that companies have figured out how to work remotely, this opens up the pool of applicants, particularly for some in more administrative roles or in tech roles, especially here in Chicago where things were getting so tight. The fact that now we can go anywhere in the US and find really good talent and make it work, I think, again, that is going to really help the productivity and the turnaround for our companies here in the area. So I think those are the two things I'm most excited about.
Great. Well, I wish we could continue this. I think we're just kind of getting the juices flowing and warmed up, and it's been a great panel. I think we covered a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time. For those of you who are interested, we will be happy to get you contact information on any and all of our panelists. Just let us know if you'd like. I'll ask Brad if there's a way we can, I don't exactly know how that happens. Is there a way we can have people send in a request for contact if there's so desire, and then we can get back to them? Is that doable?
Yeah, for sure. If they just want to, they can just drop their contact information in the chat, and I can get that chat transcript sent over afterwards.
Great. Good. So please do that if you're interested in having any additional discussions with Shazia, with Kelly, with Kathy, with Jennifer, Mark, myself, Ross, or any of us. We'd be delighted to refer you to the appropriate experts in a particular field if there are any areas where you need further clarification or discussion. With that, I believe our formal session is complete. Unless anyone has anything they would like to urgently add at the last minute here, I will say we're going to call it and let everybody take a break. Thank you all for participating. I think we had about 30 people in the room, so thank you all, especially for those who had comments. We appreciate your participation. Thank you again to our great panel. Thank you, Shazia, Kelly, Kathy, Jennifer, and Mark for for your time this morning and your expertise. We certainly appreciate it. And let's all hope that the next time we do a breakout session, we'll be able to do it in person and reflect back on these days. So thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you at the next session, which I believe will begin in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.